I can tell you it's a pleasure and honor to speak to a group like this, particularly today, because yesterday Ruckus launched a new integrated library of applications. And it's really the first of its kind, and I'll tell you a little bit about it later, a very little bit about it. But today we're going to present to you some research that we put together to inform our thinking around creating this integrated app library. Working with me today is Ross Marks from a company called Play Science, and he's going to tell you a little bit about Play Science and the guts of that operation. Then we're going to take you straight into the research that we've done.
Yeah, so to give you a little bit of background on research and what Play Science is, we are primarily a research firm that works in the area of play, kids, education, and innovation. And for this project, we worked with Ruckus on launching their new Ruckus reader and supporting them in a research capacity. And as part of that, we did a lot of research on kids, parents, and their perspective on tablet devices and how kids are interacting with that, which is what we're presenting today.
I won't spend I have 4 or 5 slides on general trends here, and I'm going to skip them fairly quickly. But what most people are saying right now is that we're at the beginning of tablet adoption, not anywhere near the end. It's forecasted, generally speaking, that we will be, that tablets will overtake PCs, as you know, in the classroom within 5 years. And what we see here is the app revenue is an important part of what keeps people like Ruckus in business. But it's very, very fragmented market. So one of the things that is going to be very important for folks who do what we do, which is the business of making educational apps, is to crack the marketplace that is so fragmented. One of the other major things that's happened is kids are finding their ways to ebooks. Now, some of the numbers here, if you look at ebook, is that 475% growth are driven by the Hunger Games, and because, but some of it is also driven by the number of devices that have been handed down, the Nooks, the Kindles, even the iPad 1s that are found away in the hands of children. So it isn't hard to think that that we're really at a revolutionary moment, probably as revolutionary, we believe, as the arrival of the paperback book in the 40s. This is a fundamental change in reading habits. And these are just a few statistics, which I pulled from Nielsen and Forrester. We have our own stats here, pulled from a different sample. But the astounding thing is the ubiquity of these devices and the access that kids have to the devices and how often they're on the devices. So that's all good news for people that do what we do, of course. But at the end of the day, we have a responsibility, we think, to give back something that's really high quality. And that's really the issue here. We believe that in this fragmented market, it's really hard to discern between what constitutes a great educational app and what's something that's just been done for fun. So, if you could talk.
So in regards to the study that we're really presenting today, we started off with these 4 goals. One was to really investigate parents' experience that they provide for their children. Understand what parents actually use to define what an educational app is, because that is kind of unique to everyone, and so we try to shed a little light on that. Also gauge the parents' involvement with their kids' reading and their development, which, much like any research on exercise, you'll see is a little skewed, but we'll talk about that. And then also measuring parents' feelings of guilt with respect to children and digital devices. So, what is that, aka mom or dad guilt, when you give your child a device to entertain them while you get ready or get dressed, in my case often. So we really wanted to measure that and then look and identify what were the factors that were contributing to that and what's actually going to help alleviate that. So this was an online survey of 300 parents, children between the ages of 4 and 8. It was a nationally representative sample of we then screened for children and then mainly technology ownership. And as you can see, we have computers pretty well penetrated this market, and tablet use is at 65% overall. So this is a pretty technology savvy sample that we have.
There's also not one device in every household, and that's important to consider. We have several devices going, and in some families, folks who are more likely to live, quote unquote, below the digital divide, the iTouch is the computer in the house. So that's pretty interesting as far as the implications for how developers work. Now here we have a slide that talks about, generally speaking, the device use in households, but what kids are using of their parents' devices. In our instance, we saw that kids have a different rate of use with each of the devices. And most exciting for us is that many kids, 68% I believe, or 63%, use these devices to listen to stories. And in fact, from our own experience, because we can gather this information through analytics, the time when the Ruckus apps are used the most are between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m., which is essentially bedtime. We feel great about that, and what it also suggests to us is that there's probably more parental involvement or a need for more parental involvement in that period of time.
Also, what's interesting back here is if you look at the household ownership, 65% of these households have a tablet. Believe it or not, a tablet. 58% actually allow their kids to use it. So we look at that slightly differently. 90% of the tablet devices out there are actually used by the kids.
Now, you saw the Forrester research that said 70%, but we sampled a pretty sophisticated group of parents through our early questionnaire. So if you're a tech-savvy family, you can pretty much guarantee the child has access to that tablet. It's a family device. It isn't a device that belongs to the parent.
Yeah, so in terms of, we mentioned that 63% of are actually reading and listening to stories on these lines, but other things they're doing, of course, they're playing games, they're doing Temple Run, Cut the Rope, Angry Birds, that's common. They're also looking at websites, they're looking at pictures, they're watching videos, so they really are using these tablets to the full extent of their interactive experience that they've been designed for.
And here, and this is, I think, a very interesting piece of information. We have roughly 60% of kids are using the tablet more than 4 times a week. About, I believe it's now around 25% are using the tablet each and every day. So that's, that adds up actually. If you think of the market penetration of a Leapfrog or some of the other devices, VTech, you actually have the potential of much deeper market penetration, but also, you have to also consider how fragmented the market is for iOS apps.
And also,
I'm sorry to interrupt you. You keep saying tablet, but your slides all say touch screen. So smartphones are touch screen, iTouch is a touch screen. Are you referring to tablets or touch screens in these data?
this is referring to touch devices.
Okay, thank you.
And I should go back one?
Sure.
And part of it, if we look at this, we're looking at 40% of the parents report that their kids are using the device 1 to 3 times a week. That is the current trend today, and a lot of that is parents just not allowing kids to use the tablets, phone devices on weekdays. It'll only being a weekend type activity for the kids, mainly because it's viewed as a solely entertainment device, which is probably not going to be the trend for much longer.
Here's another interesting, what fascinated me about this was not necessarily the parents involved, but how many children actually had access to their parents' code and could download apps. And of course that's been a problem in many instances, and I think many app developers, including Ruckus, we address that through various lockout mechanisms. Yes?
What age group are we talking about here?
The 48
48
right here?
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I missed that.
Okay.
Sorry, is that downloading free apps or paid apps?
This is downloading apps. I have to double check. Believe you left it open-ended.
Uh-oh.
Good question.
Okay. Number of apps for the kids. Here we have 40% of the app of the population here have 10 or more apps on the device. So what you have here is a lot of kids downloading and parents downloading a lot of apps. But the story gets a little more interesting as we move forward. Not as many educational apps, not nearly as many. The sense here is that there's probably a dying need for what could be what parents classify as educational. Of course, this is a very wide and open category. Warren Buckleiter from Children's Technology Review says that 10% of the children's apps that claim to be educational actually are. And so the curation of this space Apple has not. They've done a lot of things tremendously well, but they haven't necessarily curated, like, taken a point of view on what constitutes a real educational app versus one that is pretending to be educational.
So looking at the educational value of the apps, so we actually asked parents to rate how educational are the apps that their kids are using that claim to be educational. There's not a lot of positive consensus. So 72% of parents are really not convinced that it's very educational for the kids. So there is definitely evidence from a parent's perspective that there's a lot of educational washing out there. Things like just games saying that they're educational because they have physics model and they're really just a game.
Yes?
What were the criteria that you gave them to make this evaluation or definition of educational?
We actually asked them what they defined as educational later. We just asked them on a scale of 0 to 10 how educational they thought that their apps actually were on
We get into more specifics in a second. So. This is what parents care about. Problem-solving skills are paramount. Apps that focus on specific skills are still very important. And they're focused on 21st century skills versus the baseline academics.
It is the problem solving, identifying what the problem is, generating alternatives, evaluating those and selecting which is the best term to go with, encouraging creativity. So those are really what the strongest elements parents really need to see in an app for it to be educational. If you look at other features, these are less important. So things that we might typically have thought, credited by teachers, endorsed by schools, those aren't as important to parents for an app to be educational as it actually encouraging creativity or having problem-solving skills.
And parents aren't particularly fussy about if apps contain games and entertainment. They can still be educational with these components. Now we're going to run some focus group video. It's about 2 minutes of parents, real parents, talking about what they're looking for. And I should tell you, you're looking at some Ruckus products, so it's not entirely blind, but it will be, I think, informative.
What's going to catch your attention, right? Because there's a lot of stuff flying at you when you're going and downloading
I want to know
stuff.
what their actual credentials are.
Okay.
Who's developing the software? Is it somebody that's like a techie that that knows what they're doing, that they know the technical stuff, or have they actually
Or is it
gone to
scholastics?
school? Yeah, have they actually gone to school
There needs to be a name.
know what the development benchmarks are. Learning.
It would be a good ebook app if while you were reading it, it would be a game. Like you couldn't just hit play a game. You could, as you read through the app and it does its thing, it's a game.
Like you have to get to the page
You have to get
4
through this page and then you
to do something fun.
make the car go
Oh, I
down
see
the
what
road
you're saying.
and then
Okay,
it
yeah.
tells you why the car went down the road or something.
What is the balance for your kids of what you want from like Disney Nick type stuff to things they already know to new? That's like 4 different things. Books by authors they knew, no, but new books they knew. What for your child this age?
Depends, it really depends on the age.
Yeah,
So for your
kids too. Like my
Yeah.
little girl eat up about My Little Pony thing.
Yeah. Okay. What if the activities in the book themselves sort of grade themselves up or down depending on how your child is? Is that important to you?
So this type of stuff. What did you learn? Where are you at? That's I want to get a quick, like a quick shot, like a snapshot of it. So okay, he did this, he read this, he knows this, he did this, he did that, and then boom. That's what I do.
Right. So we've been calling it Ruckus Reader. That's sort of the tentative name that they have for it. What do you guys think of the name? The company is named Ruckus Media, but does Ruckus Reader make sense?
It's catchy.
Yeah, it's catchy.
I would guess too hard to be.
Okay. Lots of fun, and parents, we did focus grouping all around the country with this, and of course, the New York focus group is very different so here's what how parents learn about applications. They still learn about this. When did we finish this survey?
2 weeks ago.
Yeah. So this is very current. They're still learning about it in the App Store, which which is a little disturbing because I believe that there's plenty of work to be done with Apple in presenting educational apps in the correct way. But other parents, word of mouth is huge here. That, for those of you who are developers, shouldn't be forgotten. And parenting websites, of course, are incredibly important. But still, the App Store is the leading. Still now, the App Store is the leading venue, and it's a very fickle black box as far as getting featured. Okay. How involved are parents with their kids' education? This is very interesting because we think actually this is a little bit like how much do you exercise? Parents, what they say they're doing here is probably any teacher in the room will tell you this is probably not accurate. Probably they don't know the reading fundamentals children should be mastering at their age. But the nice thing about this is it's aspirational. They believe they should be doing this. The last point, it's important for apps to measure outside of the classroom. 70% of parents said yes, that would be important. So, from our perspective, we think this is really good news because parents are actually, at least the parents that we poll, seem to be very engaged or want to be engaged with the child's activities.
Yeah, and also what this gets at, earlier we talked about parents not really being that satisfied with the educational value of the educational apps. And for the application to actually tell the parent what the app is doing in terms of influencing the child's education, that is really important, and that will help them become more satisfied to know that their child is actually learning something and not just doing something else on the iPad, looking like he's reading something, the parents walk by, and then flipping to Netflix after the parent walks away.
Interactive education is usually important. I mean, that makes sense because this is what this device is supposed to do. Right? Harnessing the power of this device, I would argue we're at the beginning of what this device can do, tablet devices can do, certainly not anywhere even near the middle. And I think you're going to see some very exciting things coming from us, but from a lot of other developers as far as interactivity and learning. How guilty do parents feel when letting their kids play with touch devices? This is the one that really shocked me. They don't really feel guilty at all. Now, 56% feel some guilt, but only 2% of parents actually said, I'm really racked with guilt. This is really not a good thing. But it's the folks in the middle, the folks that are kind of feeling guilty. That is something that we would need to address as a group. But look at paper books. There's still, some guilt. 15% of folks feel slightly guilty of having a child read a book as opposed to doing something else.
Yeah, and that's with the type of research we do that, you're always going to see that. Do they feel guilty? Yeah. Did I want my kid playing outside today? Did I not want to spend time with them? Was I here read a book? I got to go do something else. So there's always going to be some reason. Like guilt from a psychological construct is very complex, and in a survey form like this, we can only kind of touch on it to get a quick measure that we can then use as a gauge to
let's just face it, there's a lot of guilt out there.
Does she even Brooklyn?
So what's very interesting here is the more educational apps you believe you own, the lower your guilt. So if you believe you own a lot of educational applications, you feel much better about handing that device to the child.
Yeah, so when we look at it a different way, so parents with no guilt, 51% of those feel their apps are very educational. Parents with some guilt, only 16% feel their apps are very educational. So this is really getting at, if parents feel their apps are educational, that feeling of guilt diminishes dramatically. That's over 200% more likely to feel their app.
But this is not shocking news, but what it does is it amplifies the need for educational apps that are really educational, as we said before, and setting up some standards by which these apps can be measured.
And also interest in primary educational value. So again, the parents with no guilt, 76% of them are very interested in an app's primary educational value versus 45%. So again, this guilt thing is really tracking on education. And then the other aspect of this was playing games as a family. Now this was different from education. This didn't involve learning in any way. But with the no guilt group here, 72% thought that playing games as a family on a touch device was important to the child's development, versus only 40% with some guilt. So again, looking at kids in this market, kids are very family oriented. They want to be with their parents and spend time with them, and right, as they get older, they're kind of going into that tween age and rebelling a little bit, but they still want that family time.
Well, and parents do. It's very important for parents to have some kind of interaction or co-viewing with the applications.
And then the other aspect was, all these games that claim to be educational, the parents that really want to know about what the kids are learning, again, they're much less likely to feel any kind of guilt with letting their kids play with the touch devices.
Okay, so that sums up the key points of our research. I was told I was allowed to just tell you a little bit about the Ruckus platform that launched yesterday, so I'll do that very briefly, really in two slides. The Ruckus platform is an integrated application, basically a set of applications, bookshelves, that all sit below the mother screen of the iPad. And they're wired together so that kids can actually interact without going back to the top screen. And we're running a system of information, fully COPPA compliant, for kids and for their parents. The reader also includes elements of e-readers. We have Houghton Mifflin as a partner and expect many of the publishers to join us, and video, educational video. And you'll see some exciting announcements coming from Ruckus on the video side. So we're really a digital superstore for kids with assessment tools attached. And premium titles are coming from major publishers. What's fun here is the reader meter, which is, you'll see here on the far left. That is where we actually go in and we give folks a snapshot of what's happening. We developed the curriculum with Play Science with the University of Michigan to make sure that we're on a solid footing in giving parents feedback. So it's really a one-of-a-kind, revolutionary, we think, certainly first of its kind, integrated app platform where all the apps talk to one another and ultimately talk to the parents. And this is just a snapshot of what my mother would have gotten on my comprehension. Looks like I need a little help. And also a snapshot of what else? Sorry?
It's okay. Reading's fine.
Yeah, no, it is. But we believe, this is the last thing I'll say, I'll just quickly run through this. We believe that it isn't an either-or choice for digital and printed books. So you'll see here, we were actually recommending print titles within the Ruckus Reader format and allow click-throughs for parents to purchase print titles. And that's what I would say to the audience is again, kids should be reading everywhere, all the time, at their leisure. And we really feel that we have to move away from the digital and print conversation and more towards the quality of the experience. And sorry, these are tips that we offer from parents and teachers. So that's where you can find that. That's the end of the commercial, and that's the end of the presentation. Any questions on the presentation? Thanks. Yeah?
What's the difference between what you're calling iReader and e-reader?
Sure. iReader are interactive storybooks with assessment tools attached. E-reader is a straightforward presentation of an e-book. Yes, in the back.
Can you talk a little bit about the causality of the guilt, no guilt, and the educational value? Is there perceived educational value because they're not feeling guilty, or are they not feeling guilty because they believe there's educational?
Does everybody hear that question?
That's my question.
Sorry. Let me repeat that. Can you, yeah, which one came first? Is it, I have a question about the causality of that chart. Are they feeling not guilty because there's perceived educational value? Or is it the other way around? I just forgot how. Is guilt because of the educational value or vice versa?
Honestly, probably a little both. That's something that we really can get into in this format of research. That's probably a much more in-depth qualitative study to interview people. But from the data, it was mostly the parents that felt their apps were educational didn't feel the guilt.
Yes?
Do you by any chance know what apps they own and knew about? The people who were rating education with those, et cetera?
No. We just know the number of apps they had, and then the number of apps that they had that were educational, or the number of apps they had for their kids, and the number of apps they had for their kids that were educational.
But are they defining educational, or do you?
No, they defined it. So it was basically it's their perception of education,
Yeah.
which isn't fair.
Did you find the results differed at all by income level?
No, not as much. Although with the technology skew, we did skew towards higher incomes, but there were some differences, of course, but it was not as radical as we would have seen with other aspects, or we saw with some of the other information that we showed.
And so particularly the good question, that upper income
People who did not feel guiltier than lower income people?
No, actually the guilt didn't show any difference. That was pretty much flat. Surprising.
Good question.
Am I allowed to ask a business related question?
Sure.
What is your business model? Do you get 30% like Apple? Is it 20%? Or how do you get paid? How do you make money?
Well, all of our relationships are revenue share relationships. We don't necessarily go into the details publicly on what those are out of fairness to our partners. But yes, it's all revenue share. And you know what I didn't mention, you saw a lot of brands up there. Each one of those brands really has become an entrepreneur with us in this space, because we were mining new territory, and they've been working with us to develop and design what we've come up with.
Excuse me.
Sorry.
Hi, I had a question about one of your numbers. You said 2% of parents felt very guilty about letting their kids use digital devices. I was wondering if you also had the number on how much feels some guilt. I couldn't remember if I saw it.
56.
56. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd invite you to talk to us about parents feeling guilty for not letting their kids use their.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Did you have any in the focus groups? Anybody who said they felt a moral compulsion to let their kid play with it?
No, I mean the only ones that feeling that had that were the parents that didn't have access to one, or the kids that had access through school, through friends, but the parents didn't have the means to get one. But I can't say that was just an absence. I mean, I was just they wanted it, but it wasn't there yet for them.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like you're providing a platform and you're partnering with developers of iBooks and ebooks, as it were, right?
It's a really good question. Actually, all the development that you've seen here and what launched yesterday was done by Ruckus internally. Where we want to go and where we will be very soon is white labeling our assembly engine for other developers.
So that leads to the heart of my question, thank you, sir, is did you set forth a criterion for what are your own educational apps and what are the requisite interactive elements to achieve those curricular or educational goals?
Yeah, well that's another great question and probably a bit of a hot button. So don't anybody throw anything at me, okay? Our curriculum is based on Common Core. And that's been it's approved in many, many states, as you know. There's a whole web support. You can click through out of that parent ping onto our webpage for a much deeper dive on your child's progress. We also describe the curriculum. And part of this, the reason why we've done it this way is my own experience. My own son didn't learn to read, until he was in 5th grade. And the way he learned to read was on Garfield comics. And any reading teacher will know that you have to have engagement before you can have a child really want to learn this. But the teacher, I was the head of a publishing house at the time, and the teacher was talking to me about fluency, and I was the head of the Simon & Schuster Children's Program. I had no idea what she was talking about, and I was embarrassed to ask. So what we think part of what we're doing here is educating parents around these ideas, even though they feel they already know. We're educating parents as well as giving them information. So there's a fairly deep dive on Common Core on our website, Ruckus Richter.
Thank you.
Yes, is this starting? I have a question about some of the research you showed. Maybe I missed it. Did you talk about the methodology at all? What your sample size was? Was it an online survey?
Yeah, it was an online panel. Life Science has a panel. 300 respondents nationwide, and then we screened for various aspects, mainly technology, device ownership, and then kids between the ages of 4 and 8.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Quick question. Your assessment of reading, I'm assuming that you're using telemetry to measure that assessment?
Yeah, the data is captured, pinged to the cloud, pinged back to the parent. And yes, we have embedded hooks, time spent, right and wrong, several different touch points, pinged to the cloud, pinged back.
So it's mostly, so what you're looking at is mostly an interaction in the book, right?
That's right, exactly. Every touch stroke, every swipe is a piece of information. And we believe down the road, there are a lot of other things that we will be able to do.
Right.
Again, all with parental permission. The parents have to opt in, and the kids can certainly enjoy this experience without opting in to the reader feedback, as it were. Yes?
Here.
Sorry. We'll come to you right next. Yes?
Hey, so it sounds like a great opportunity to look at the efficacy of the different activities, because you'll have experiences from hopefully thousands and thousands of kids. Do you have built into your system a way to do a meta-analysis and make those findings available to the field in terms of what kinds of activities actually are effective?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We do want to share the information, and with our partners, our brand partners will be sharing information about kids' interests, again, all in an anonymous way. But we absolutely do. And we believe we're really at the beginning of, this great thing about software is different from print publishing. You can keep changing something.
Right.
So we're at the beginning of developing something together with our brand partners and with the educational community. And I think there are plenty of folks who would be interested in helping out, and we were very interested in getting help as well.
Do you see a connection with the generational dynamics that the intelligence group was presenting, that in terms of this guilt finding? Because it seems like Generation X was raised by wolves on TV and cable, right? So we may, all I have to do to feel less guilty about my 3-year-old's media consumption is think about my own, and then I feel like, well, I'm not a sociopath, he's getting a lot less screen time than me, it's all fine, right? But do parents have the self-awareness that you talk to about the difference maybe in their own access as a kid?
Well, I read in a recent study that actually parents feel that a little under 2 hours on the iPad a day is acceptable, most parents. Now, what's also interesting is the eyeballs are moving from the television screen to the tablet, and that is bad news for cable operators, and it's good news for developers. And your cable box is moved out of your closet, we believe, and onto your tablet device. And that we think is one of the mega trends. That's why we're doing things like offering video, because if you have, very soon now, everyone will be able to broadcast to the TV.
Can you share with us some of the reasons behind the 300 sample size and how you targeted those 300 people? Because in this world, it just seems to me that 300 is not a statistically significant sample size, and if you look at the percent of the population that has an iPad, it's at least we want it.
Yeah, so the sample size was 2 things, just a trade-off between desire. Yes, we would have loved to have more, but then time and budget was a constraint, which is why I went 300. With the sample size, after you go above 300, the margin of error doesn't decrease that dramatically. So if we went up to 1,000, it wouldn't have been much more of a statistical difference from our analytical side of it. So 300 was a nice number that kind of went well with what we needed analytically and then cost-wise as well. And yeah, larger is better, but with the sample that we have, 8 out of 300 was well cleaned, and B, there wasn't a lot of variation within the sample, outside what we looked for, of course. That would less that we would have needed a much larger sample. With that 300, over 65% of them, or about 65% of them had tablet devices, which was more than what we were really looking for.
One more question. In terms of the demographics, or was there any other criteria in picking those 300?
Demographics, no. We tracked that, but the only other criteria that we had were having kids within the age group that we're looking for, allowing the kids to access the device, and owning some technology device, touch device.
Yes?
Hi, can you talk a little bit about the educational activities and system built into your iReaders, and also who developed that content? Was it you or partnership with your?
Well, actually, as I mentioned before, we developed that in concert with Play Science. And these folks have several PhD educators on their staff. And also with Elliot Soloway at the University of Michigan. I don't know if you know Elliot, but he's a wonderful guy. And actually, I wish he could be standing next to me today. He is a phenomenal person, a real leader in mobile learning, mentor to Larry Page and Tony Fidel, and a real pioneer in mobile learning. And so he oversaw everything that we did. Now, is it perfect? Let's be real, everybody. It's not going to be perfect from day one. But directionally, where it's going, I think is very exciting. And most educators agree, from the educators that we've spoken to, that we're solid. It's not very sparkly, but it's solid right now. And that was the most important thing. It couldn't be wrong. And that's what I said to folks from day one. We cannot be wrong in the information that we're supplying. So.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.